we talked a lot today about how to hear the marginalized narrative and how to make sure that we're hearing the voices and acknowledging the realities of those who are not like us. Among those, I'll introduce my guest reader. This is my stuffed Cthulhu, or Cthulhu. And this piece is by Neil Gaiman, who was generous enough to let us access his work or share his work here during the coronavirus pandemic. And this piece is called I, Cthulhu. It is Cthulhu's sort of dictated last thoughts.
Well, I will just say before you read to us that I have this baby Yoda Cthulhu right here with me. I'm just saying. And I have this little guy here as well, almost by accident. And I wanted to show off before you start reading.
Well, maybe not as underrepresented as we think.
There you go.
Our work is working. And so I give you I, Cthulhu. Cthulhu, they call me. Great Cthulhu. Nobody can pronounce it right. Are you writing this down? Every word? Good. Where shall I start? Very well, then, the beginning. Write this down, Waitley. I was spawned uncounted eons ago in the dark mists of Ka-Yinaya. Now, of course, I don't know how to spell it, write it as it sounds, of nameless nightmare parents under a gibbous moon. It wasn't the moon of this planet, of course, it was a real moon. On some nights, it filled over half the sky, and as it rose, you could watch the crimson blood drip and trickle down its bloated face, staining it red until at its height it bathed the swamps and towers in a gory, dead red light. Those were the days, or rather the nights on the whole. Our place had a fun of sorts, but it was old even back then. I remember that on the night it finally exploded, we all slithered down to the beach to watch. But I get ahead of myself. I never knew my parents. My father was consumed by my mother as soon as he had fertilized her, and she, in her turn, was eaten by myself at my birth. That is my first memory, as it happens, squirming my way out of my mother, the gamey taste of her still in my tentacles. Don't look so shocked, Waitley. I find you humans just as revolting. Which reminds me, did you remember to feed the Shoggoth? I thought I heard it gibbering. I spent my first few thousand years in those swamps. I did not like this, of course, for I was the color of a young trout and about 4 of your feet long. I spent most of my time creeping up on things and eating them, and in my turn avoiding being crept upon and eaten. So passed my youth. Then one day, I believe it was a Tuesday, I discovered that there was more to life than food. Sex? Of course not. I will not reach that stage until after my next estivation. Your piddly little planet will be long cold by then. It was that Tuesday that my Uncle Hastur slithered down to my part of the swamp with his jaws fused. It meant that he did not intend to dine that visit, and that we could talk. Now that is a stupid question even for you, Waitley. I don't use either of my mouths in communicating with you, do I? Very well then. One more question like that and I'll find someone else to relate my memoirs to, and you will be feeding the Shoggoth. We were going out, said Hastur to me. Would you like to accompany us? We, I asked him, who's we? Myself, he said, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, Sathogha, Lag, Shub-Niggurath, Young Yuggoth, and a few others. You know, he said, the boys. I am freely translating for you here, wait till you understand. Most of them were a, bi, or trisexual, and old Lag Shub-Niggurath was at least 1,000 young or so, it says. That branch of the family was always given to exaggeration. We're going out, he concluded, and we were wondering if you fancied some fun. I did not answer him at once. To tell the truth, I wasn't all that fond of my cousins, and due to some particularly eldritch distortion of the planes, I'd always had a great deal of trouble seeing them clearly. They tend to get fuzzy around the edges, and some of them, Sabaoth is a case in point, have a great many edges. But I was young, I craved excitement. There has to be more to life than this, I would cry, as the delightfully fetid carnal smells of the swamp miasmatized around me, and I overheard the now and zitidars whooped and squarked. I said yes, as you have probably guessed, and I oozed after Hastur until we reached the meeting place. As I remember, we spent the next moon discussing where we were going. Azathoth had his hearts set on distant Shagai, and Nyarlathotep had a thing about the unspeakable place. I can't for the life of me think why. The last time I was there, everything was shut. It was all the same to me, Waitley. Anywhere wet and somehow subtly wrong, and I feel right at home. But Yog-Sothoth had the last word, as he always does, and we came to this plain. You've met Yog-Sothoth, have you not, my little two-legged beastie? I thought as much. He opened the way for us to come here. To be honest, I didn't think much of it. Still don't. If I'd known the trouble we were going to have, I doubt I'd have bothered, but I was younger then. As I remember, our first stop was Dim Carcosa. Scared the shit out of me, that place. These days, I can look at your kind without a shudder, but all those people without a scale or pseudopod between them gave me the quivers. The King in Yellow was the first I ever got on with. The Tatterdemalion Queen. You don't know of him? Necronomicon, page 704 of the complete edition, hints at his existence, and I think that idiot Prynne mentions him in De Vermis Mysterious. And then there's Chambers, of course. Lovely fellow, once I got used to him. He was the one who first gave me the idea. What the unspeakable hells is there to do in this dreary dimension, I asked him. He laughed. When I first came here, he said, a mere color out in space, I asked myself the same question. Then I discovered the fun one can get in conquering these odd worlds, subjugating the inhabitants, getting them to fear and worship you. It's a real laugh. Of course, the old ones don't like it. The old ones, I asked. No, he said, the old ones. It's capitalized. Funny chaps, like great starfish-headed barrels with filmy great wings that they fly through space with. Fly through space? Fly? I was shocked. I didn't think anybody flew these days. Why bother when one can sluggle anyway? I could see why they called them the old ones. Pardon, old ones. What do these old ones do? I asked the king. I'll tell you all about sluggling later, Whately. Pointless, though. You lack wishnai. Although perhaps badminton equipment would do almost as well. Where was I? Oh, yes. What do these old ones do? I asked the king. Nothing much, he explained. They just don't like anybody else doing it. I undulated, writhing my tentacles as if to say, I have met such beings in my time, but fear the message was lost on the king. Do you know of any places ripe for conquering? I asked him. He waved a hand vaguely in the direction of a small and dreary patch of stars. There's one over there that you might like, he told me. It's called Earth. Bit off the beaten track, but lots of room to move. Silly bugger. That's all for now, Whately. Tell someone to feed the Shoggoth on your way out. Second section. Is it time already, Whately? Don't be silly. I know that I sent for you. My memory is as good as it ever was. You know what that means, don't you? In his house at Ryla, dead Cthulhu rates dreaming. A justified exaggeration that I haven't been feeling too well recently. It was a joke. One had a joke. Are you writing all this down? Good. Keep writing. I know where we got up to yesterday. Regalia, Earth. That's an example of the way that languages change, the meanings of words, fuzziness. I can't stand it. Once upon a time, Regalia was the Earth, or at least the part of it that I ran, the wet bits at the start. Now it's just my little house here, latitude 47 degrees south, longitude 126 degrees west. Or the old ones. They call us the old ones now, or the great old ones, as if there were no difference between us and the Barrel Boys. Fuzziness. So I came to Earth, and in those days it was a lot wetter than it is today. A wonderful place it was, the seas as rich as soup, and I got on wonderfully with the people. Dagon and the boys, I use the word literally this time, we all lived in the water in those far-off times, and before you could say Cthulhu Flain, I had them building and slaving and cooking, and being cooked, of course. Which reminds me, there was something I meant to tell you. True story. There was a ship sailing on the seas, on a Pacific cruise, and on this ship was a magician, a conjurer, whose function was to entertain the passengers. And there was this parrot on the ship. Every time the magician did a trick, the parrot would ruin it. How? He'd tell them how it was done, that's how. He put it up his sleeve, the parrot would squawk, or he stacked the deck, or it's got a false bottom. The magician didn't like it. Finally, the time came for him to do his biggest trick. He announced it. He rolled up his sleeves, he waved his arms. At that moment, the ship bucked and smashed over to one side. Sunken Regalia had risen beneath him. Hordes of my servants, loathsome fishmen, swarmed over the side, seized the passengers and crew, and dragged them beneath the waves. Regalia sank beneath the waters once more, awaiting that time when dread Cthulhu shall rise and reign once more. Alone above the foul waters, the magician, overlooked by my little Batrachian boobies, for which they paid heavily, floated, clinging to a spar, all alone. And then, far above him, he noticed a small green shape. It came lower, finally perching on a clump of nearby driftwood, and he saw it was the parrot. The parrot cocked its head to one side and squinted up at the magician. All right, it says. I give up. How did you do it? Of course it's a true story, Waitley. Would Black Cthulhu, who slimed out of the dark stars when your most eldritch nightmares were suckling at their mother's pseudo-mammaria, who waits for the time that the stars come right to come forth from his tomb palace, revive the faithful and resume his rule, who waits to teach anew the high and luscious pleasures of death and revelry, would he lie to you? Sure I would. Shut up, Waitley, I'm talking. I don't care where you heard it before. We had fun in those days. Carnage and destruction, sacrifice and damnation, ichor and slime and ooze, and foul and nameless games. Food and fun, it was one long party, and everybody loved it, except for those who found themselves impaled on wooden stakes between a chunk of cheese and pineapple. Oh, there were giants on Earth in those days. It couldn't last forever. Down from the skies they came with filmy wings and rules and regulations and routines and Dochna knows how many forms to be filled out in quintuplicate. Banal little bureaucrats, the lot of them. You could see it just looking at them. 5 pointed heads. Everyone you looked at had 5 points. Arms, whatever, on their heads, which I might add were always in the same place. None of them had the imagination to grow 3 arms or 6 or 102. 5 every time. No offense meant. We didn't get on. They didn't like my party. They rapped on the walls, metaphorically. We paid no attention. Then they got mean, argued, bitched, fought. Okay, we said, you want the sea, you can have the sea. Lock, stock, and starfish-headed barrel. We moved on to the land. It was pretty swampy back then. And we bit a gargantuan monolithic structures that dwarfed the mountains. You know what killed off the dinosaurs, Waitley? We did, in one barbecue. But those pointy-headed killjoys couldn't leave well enough alone. They tried to move the planet nearer the sun, or was it further away? I never actually asked them. Next thing I knew, we were under the sea again. You had to laugh. The city of the old ones got it in the neck. They hated the dry and the cold, as did their creatures. All of a sudden, they were in the Antarctic, dry as a bone and cold as the lost plains of thrice accursed Lang. Here endeth the lesson for today, Waitley. And will you please get somebody to feed that blasted Shoggoth? Part 3. Professors Armitage and Wilmarth are both convinced that not less than 3 pages are missing from the manuscript at this point, citing the text in length. I concur. The stars changed, Waitley. Imagine your body cut away from your head, leaving you a lump of flesh on a chill marble slab, blinking and choking. That was what it was like. The party was over. It killed us. So we wait here below. Dreadful, huh? Not at all. I don't give a nameless dread. I can wait. I sit here dead and dreaming, watching the ant empires of man rise and fall, tower and crumble. One day, perhaps it will come tomorrow, perhaps in more tomorrows than your feeble mind can encompass, the stars will be rightly conjoined in the heavens, and the time of destruction shall be upon us. I shall rise from the deep, and I shall have dominion over the world once more. Riot and revel, blood food and foulness, eternal twilight and nightmare, and the screams of the dead and the not dead, and the chant of the faithful. And after, I shall leave this plane when this world is a cold cinder orbiting a lightless sun. I shall return to my own place, where the blood drips nightly down the face of a moon that bulges like the eye of a drowned sailor, and I shall estivate. Then I shall mate, and in the end I shall feel a stirring within me, and I shall feel my little one eating its way out into the light. Are you writing this all down, Waitley? Good. Well, that's all. The end. Narrative concluded. Guess what we're going to go do now? That's right. We're going to feed the Shoggoth.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. Who would have thought? I didn't know that Gaiman did Cthulhu. That's fun.
In the name of understanding multiple perspectives and not going with, leaning carelessly on our tropes. I think we've heard from a range of perspectives today.
I think that was not necessarily intentional, but I really like that's where the show ended up. So definitely. And on that note, I would like to thank Malka, thank Steve and Tammy, the production crew that makes all this happen.